Today's story is called The Forgotten Village, a creepy story of isolation and horror. The Forgotten Village was a small and remote community that had been abandoned for decades. It was said that the villagers had fled in the middle of the night, leaving everything behind. No one knew why they had left or where they had gone. But that didn't stop curious travelers from passing through the village, drawn by the eerie and unsettling atmosphere that seemed to linger there. One such traveler was a young woman named Sarah. She had heard the stories of the Forgotten Village and was fascinated by the mystery surrounding it. She had decided to visit the village and see for herself what it was like. As Sarah made her way through the village, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The village was eerily quiet and there was a sense of unease that seemed to permeate the air. The houses were all in a state of disrepair, with broken windows and doors hanging off their hinges. It was as if the villagers had left in a hurry, without taking anything with them. As Sarah walked through the village, she came across an old church. It was the only building that seemed to be in relatively good condition. She decided to take a closer look. As she approached the church, she noticed that the door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The church was dark and musty, but it was clear that someone had been taking care of it. As she looked around, she saw that the altar was adorned with candles and there were symbols etched into the walls. It was as if the church was still in use, but by whom? Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her. She turned around, but there was no one there. She shrugged it off and continued to explore the church. As she was about to leave, she noticed a door in the back of the church. She had not noticed it before and it seemed out of place. Without thinking, she opened the door and stepped through. She found herself in a small room, with a single table in the center. On the table, there was an old book. Sarah picked up the book and opened it. Inside, she found pages filled with drawings and strange writing. She couldn't understand the writing, but the drawings were disturbing. They were of twisted and deformed creatures, unlike anything Sarah had ever seen before. Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her. She turned around, but there was no one there. She shrugged it off and continued to look at the book. As she was flipping through the pages, she felt a chill run down her spine. She had the feeling that she was being watched. She quickly closed the book and left the room. As she stepped back into the main part of the church, she realized that something was different. The candles on the altar had been lit and the symbols on the wall were glowing. Sarah realized that she had stumbled upon something that was not meant for her to see. She knew that she had to leave, but it was too late. From behind her, she heard a voice. It was a voice that seemed to come from the depths of hell. It was a voice that promised her eternal suffering. Sarah turned around to face her tormentor, but there was no one there. She was alone in the church with the voice. The voice continued to speak, filling her mind with images of terror and despair. She knew that she had to leave the village and never look back. Sarah ran out of the church and into the village. She ran until she couldn't run anymore. She collapsed on the ground, panting and trembling. When she finally caught her breath, she looked back at the village. It was still there, but it was different. The houses were no longer in disrepair, but they were now twisted and deformed. The church was no longer standing, but a twisted tower that seemed to scrape the sky. Sarah realized that the Forgotten Village was not a place for the living. It was a place where the dead were trapped, forever to suffer in the twisted and deformed world they had created. With that realization, Sarah picked herself up and ran as fast as she could, never looking back at the Forgotten Village. She never spoke of her experience to anyone, but it haunted her for the rest of her days. The end.